You're watching The Business of Law, brought to you by Bloomberg Law and the ABA Journal. I'm Lee Pacchia. We're getting a clearer picture of how BigLaw fared in the first half of 2013, and while the prospects for large law firms seem to be stabilizing after the free-fall years of 2009 and 2010, we're not quite out of the woods just yet. Joining me now, I'm happy to say we have Bruce MacEwen, law firm consultant and publisher at Adam Smith Esquire. Welcome back.
Good to be back, Lee. Thanks.
So major reports came out from Wells Fargo and Citi, and they're pointing to what many are calling flat or anemic growth for 2013, or at least the first half. What do you make of where BigLaw is late in August of 2013?
You know, I think it's on everybody's minds. And so what I did, I lined up all the numbers, Citi, Wells Fargo, also Peer Monitor. And the thing I like about these numbers, Lee, is they're real data. You know, I mean, these are the firm's bankers and you know, accounting software, so they're not going to lie. These are real numbers. And I would actually have a slightly harsher judgment than you did. I would say demand is down. I think the numbers show that across the industry. Revenue up a little bit. Billing rates up a fair amount, close to 4%, which I find implausible.
Right. That's an interesting paradox. I mean, higher billing rates, yet lower demand. These are supposed to be economic animals when we talk about law firms. Why are they raising their prices in the face of declining demand?
You would think that they would be economic animals. They're at the margins. I don't think they are. It comes out in realization. Realization is, of course, how much of what you bill your clients you collect. So I've heard any number of clients and managing partners say, you know, we can raise rates, but we're going to lose it in realization.
Law firms don't collect everything they bill? Shocking.
They collect, according to the Peer Monitor data, which is the strongest, I think, about 83 cents on the dollar. So if your rack rate is $1,000 an hour, your firm, on average, is getting $830 an hour for you. That's across the industry. Averages mislead.
So we're seeing realization rates continue to decline. I mean, we were talking before in the green room about how this is a trend that's been playing out over a long period of time. How many years has this been going on?
It's been playing out over a decade. The early part of the 2000s, it was a slow decline. Since 2008, it's accelerated. And the gap between what firms bill and what they collect, never mind the discount to begin with that comes off the rack rate and what you bill, the gap between billing and collection has never been greater. It's about 4% now, which is a lot.
Yeah. So that might help explain why we're seeing an increase in billing rates, but it doesn't quite help address clients' concerns that they feel that they're paying too much for legal services to begin with.
No, it doesn't. And the numbers tell a very odd story. And I'm not sure I'm enough of a psychiatrist to explain this because economically it makes no sense. But to your point earlier, demand is down, revenue is down, realization is down, but headcount is up. All of these three reports showed headcount up about 1% across the industry. So we already know we have overcapacity and we're adding people. I don't get it.
And we also saw expenses are on the rise, and in large measure, there were compensation expenses. It's just, I don't know where to begin with.
You know, I said a second ago, averages mislead. The dispersion in results among firms has never been greater. Unfortunately, these were aggregate reports, so you can't really go behind the numbers. It could be that firms, the lucky firms who are growing, are adding headcount faster than the firms who are suffering or shedding it. I mean, that's a possibility. But still, the fact remains that for the industry, all three reports totally consistent on this, every measure of demand, productivity, utilization is down, and they're still hiring people.
What's the consensus thinking on the expense issue? When you talk to your clients, is there a realization that this is a trend that needs to be reversed at some point, or is it not a priority? How do firms look at that issue?
The problem is the number one expense is people. And it's very hard to let people go. It's almost impossible to cut people's compensation. And firms are not they haven't attacked on the people front where the money is, which is the partners. They've attacked staff, they've attacked associates, they've de-equitized people, but in terms of equity partners, the lateral market has never been more liquid and mobility has never been higher, as you know, and people get a premium for moving. So that the more movement there is, the more sort of natural inflation there's going to be in compensation. I think that has to explain a lot of it because that's such a huge driver of expense.
So we have these not fantastic numbers for the first half of 2013. What do you expect for the second half of the year?
Well, it's a funny thing about law firms. For all practical purposes, the year is going to be over in about 45 days, by which I mean law firms' collection cycle is usually 90 days. So if you haven't billed it, done the work, sent the bill, by the end of September, you probably aren't going to see the money this year. So it's a very funny thing, but certainly by the end of October, firms should know within 1 or 2% how they're going to do on the year. I don't think there's enough time to pull everybody's bacon out of the fire. I think the year is pretty much locked in at a fairly tepid, unexciting level.
Right. So we have these numbers, and they're tepid, as you say. What's the mood out there? I mean, we have the numbers put together by outside entities, but what are clients saying about getting a feel for where their peer firms are and seeing kind of the general form of big law today take shape?
Yeah, it's a funny environment because I think tepid is a good word. There's no sense of urgency among these firms that they have to do things dramatically differently.
How can that be?
Well, Lee, they've trimmed, they've done this, that, and the other thing. They haven't changed, even thought about changing their fundamental business model, which I think is what they have to do. I'm beginning to think of this economy as an enabling economy. It enables these firms to think we can just get by. We don't have to do anything drastic because the sky is not falling. The Citibank report said the industry is no longer in free fall. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is there's no sense of urgency. Meanwhile, there are firms like MacEwen coming along, and the big law firms just don't seem to think it's a threat. This happens again and again in business.
Yeah, it's a muddle through economy, it sounds like, in big law.
Yeah,
muddle through to some element.
Muddle through is a great word. And I think to some extent, law firm managing partners are doing what they know how to do. When there's no visibility forward, you tend to rely on things you've done before that worked in the past, like bringing in laterals on the theory that it will be a net positive to revenue. Well, it's also a net positive to expense.
Right.
So it's familiar, it's comfortable. I'm not sure it's effective in this environment.
Oh, we'll have to see how it goes. Bruce, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for
Lee.
stopping by.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. That's Bruce MacEwen from Adam Smith, Esquire. If you'd like to learn more about the cases and issues we just discussed, be sure to go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. You can see more of our videos on YouTube, and you can follow our updates, of course, on Twitter. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching.